Chris, is there a trick? Oh, no, it's on now. Good. There is a trick. You have to start talking. I'm Ann Herter-Rapp, and I'm a faculty member at UWMC, and I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. This is fabulous, fabulous attendance. It will be well worth it because Judith is a fabulous speaker, but thank you all for coming out tonight. This is the first evening, the first event in our year-long focus on overconsumption on campus. And we began this year a shared reading. All of our students will at some point read part of the book or all of the book Affluenza, and we'll kick off a year of conversations about overconsumption. So I invite you to participate in the array of events that we have scheduled over the course of the year. Our next event, scheduled for Wednesday, October 4th, is a panel discussion of overconsumption and its effects on individuals, children, and families. This is followed the next night by a lecture in fine arts sponsored event, a debate over the state amendment banning gay marriage. All of these events, like tonight's event, are free, and they are also listed on the new website that we've just constructed related to these events, and that can be found at www.uwmc.uwc.edu/affluenza. So you could find all those events listed there. I should add that in addition to the events that we're holding in the evening, we're doing book groups with students, book groups with the parents of our students, book groups in the community as well, so there's lots of opportunities to get involved. In addition, tonight, you have been given forms. We're trying to get feedback on all of these events, so as you leave, you can drop off those forms, or you can complete them in the terrace room afterwards, where we'll have a reception, and you can speak further with Judith.
I'll sign books.
And she'll sign books. So kicking off this year's focus on overconsumption, I'm delighted to introduce our first guest, writer Judith Levine. Ms. Levine is the author of several books. Most recently, and the subject of tonight's attention, of course, is the book Not Buying It, which is highlighted throughout. That was published this year by Free Press, and in addition, Ms. Levine has contributed articles to numerous publications, including the Washington Post, New York Times, New York Daily News, Self, World Watch, Harper's, and many more. She's received numerous awards for her writing, including being nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in not just 2004, but also in 1986. And you might have heard Ms. Levine on Wisconsin Public Radio. She was interviewed by Kathleen Dunn, or perhaps you saw her on television because she was interviewed on Good Morning America, CNN, Oprah, MSNBC, and many other places. You'll have an opportunity, as I said, to speak with her tonight if you'd like to speak with her in person rather than mediated through the television or the radio in the reception that follows in the terrace room. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Judith Levine.
Thank you all for coming. I really want to thank Anne for having me, and also Lisa Seal and Jean Greenwood, who have done enormous amounts of work, many emails back and forth, among other things, procuring me a bicycle to ride while I'm here, and a helmet and a lock. So that was very nice. It's always a little amazing for a writer who spends most of her time in her room alone to realize that anyone who's not related to her is interested in her work. Sometimes the people who are related to you are not even. What I'll do is I'll read a little bit from Not Buying It, and then I'll take your questions and comments, and we have a couple of microphones. And you can throw tomatoes, whatever you'd like. The book takes place largely, almost all, in the year 2004, but it begins just a little before 2004 at Christmas time, 2003. So I'll read from the end of December's chapter and then some excerpts from January. December 2003, panic. The symptoms of my materialism start to show 2 weeks before D for deprivation day. Panic attacks, anxiety, depression. That DVD player we've been thinking about, we decide to buy it quick. What about the magazine subscriptions? Better renew in advance so we don't run out. My niece is graduating college in May. Would it be cheating to look for a gift now? I worry I grieve. My appetite for things gnaws relentlessly. I pass a Korean grocer with a bank of cut flowers outside. My heart is pulled toward the mini sunflowers. They're so brilliant, so perfectly formed, so convenient for apartment use. I want them. Upstairs at Zabar's, that's a huge food and housewares emporium in Manhattan, Paul's my partner, buying Paul a new coffee grinder for Christmas, the one he's got chews the coffee beans only slightly more efficiently than I would. I am distracted, no, deranged by the 100,000 housewares on display. My own kitchen and everything in it suddenly appear hopelessly shabby. Our cloth napkins are soiled. Shouldn't I pick up a half a dozen? Or that nasty old tea kettle with the rust spots inside. Here's a Calphalon on sale for only $49.99. During the week of December 22nd, Paul and I go to 4 must-see movies. On December 29th, I shell out $175 for a pair of city snow boots to wear when I'm not wearing the other country snow boots. P.S. I've never worn the city snow boots. On December 30th, when I need a tablespoon of Grand Marnier for a recipe, Paul comes home with the largest bottle of liqueur I've ever seen. On December 31st, we drive to Vermont. At 9 p.m., we light candles on the kitchen table and send off the old year with our traditional dinner of spaghetti and supermarket caviar. We toast the year without shopping with our second to last bottle of champagne. At 10 p.m., I unearth a red envelope catalog with a turned-down page featuring a small baby elephant. When I found it more than a year ago, we'd been looking for an ornament to place on a jutting rock in our perennial garden. The elephant was just right, and Paul volunteered to make the purchase, but never got around to it. Oh, well, I sigh. I guess we can say goodbye to our elephant. There are still 2 hours left, declares Paul, surprising me with his enthusiasm. He leaps online and punches his way to the red envelope website. They still have it, he shouts, reaching for his credit card. A familiar frisson courses through me, the thrill of the perfect gift, the unbelievable bargain, the hat or shirt that is absolutely me. Paul hits the send button, and a confirmation of our order appears on the screen. The concrete elephant will arrive the day after tomorrow, and after that, 363 days will pass without the UPS man brightening our door. Even if we shopped without surcease for the next hour and 37 minutes, there is only so much buying we could accomplish. The frisson turns to a chill. January, surplus. Just to give you the lay of the land here, we live in New York part of the time and in Vermont part of the time. New Year's Day. I wake to fresh coffee and forecast of snow. The wood furnace is hot, the windows frosted. As the sun melts the ice from the glass and the orchard and pond come into view, last night's chill starts to dissipate. If anyone can make it through a non-buying year, I figure, Paul and I can. We're both self-employed and work at home, conducting most of our business by phone and email. We have no office rent, no payroll to meet. Our work outfits, pajamas and pajama equivalents, require no dry cleaning. Although we lurch from deadline to deadline, hour by hour, we make our own schedules. We are free to rise before dawn and put in our 8 hours before knocking off to ski in the afternoon. We can take 2 hours to mow the lawn with a low-fuel push mower or simmer a big, cheap soup all day. Temperamentally, we are suited to the task. Paul is a non-shopper. A Vermont boy from a penurious family, he would rather spend a day a month retwisting and soldering the coils of an ancient toaster than purchase a new one with micro-graduated darkness scale and bagel-sized slots. My own shopping enthusiasms are livelier, and my appetite for brand discernment better honed than Paul's. But in the scheme of things American, I am a desultory and uncommitted consumer at best. When the market researcher calls, I'm an outlier in the sample. Yes, ma'am, I own a television, one television, about 30 years old. No, no electric hedge trimmer, no riding mower, no dishwasher, no cappuccino maker. Yes, you heard right, no microwave oven. And no, I am not talking to you through an orange juice can at the end of a string. I mostly buy what I need, I tell her politely. Other than that, I don't want much. And yet, somehow, Paul and I have managed to amass what can only be described as a lot of shit. This fact will shape our strategy for the year. Besides those few pre-project panic purchases, we have decided not to stock up. We will use whatever we have, and if something runs out, decide if we need more. A logical place to start is an inventory. So with pen and yellow pad in hand, I wander through the house in my slippers. Start with the clothes closets. These are thick with jackets, their floors a stampede of work boots, snow boots, dress boots, barn boots, and ski boots, as well as winter shoes and summer shoes for business and for play, in dry weather and wet weather, for running, walking, hiking, cross-training, mountain biking, and road biking. In Vermont alone, I have 12 pairs. Our drawers barely close for all the shirts and underwear mashed into them. The living room shelves bristle with unread books and barely listened to CDs. The bathroom is a cornucopia of vegetable products crushed and gelled into potions to heal and soothe, smooth and sedate, plus a closet full of remedies for ills that usually go away on their own. Together, Paul and I own a federal bureaucracy's worth of office supplies. These, it is agreed, are in the must-have category. But what about subcategories? Printer cartridges, absolutely. Yellow legal pads, probably. Neon-colored Post-its? And what of the dozen computers lying in state under various desks, their dead mice interred in nests of connector cables? Can't really throw those out. They have valuable data on them. Never mind the data are inscribed in forgotten computer languages on obsolete disks. I put a pot of organic 7-grain cereal on the stove, and while it cooks, I open the pantry and count. 8 kinds of rice. Short grain white, long grain white, short grain brown, long grain brown, Thai sweet rice, Chinese sweet black rice, basmati rice, arborio rice. 6 flours, 3 grades of cornmeal, 2 dozen varieties of beans and peas, and an entire section of organic farro. We have 6 oils, 6 sweeteners, and 9 vinegars. There are condiments to cheer any hungry, homesick member of the UN General Assembly who happens by, ranging from dried Chinese black mushrooms to a can of Mexican wheat la colche fungus. I'm not sure this last is a food. The top shelf is our liquor cabinet, stocked for a prince's bar mitzvah. And on the floor stands a case of prescription cat food for our diabetic cat, Julius, plus a container of low-ash, high-protein, nutrient-rich kibbles specially formulated for a feline of his age, weight, and exercise level. Add in insulin, blood glucose test strips and lancets, regular vet visits, skilled cat sitting services, kitty caviar, catnip, and an endless supply of jingly balls. And maintaining our companion animal in the style to which he is accustomed costs a minimum of $1,000 a year. Anna, a friend who grew up in Cuba, describes feeling overwhelmed and a little sick the first time she walked into an American supermarket at the age of 15. What amazed me most, she says, was that animals have their own food. January 6th. Our friends are intrigued. Some regard us with the transfixed queasiness of viewers witnessing contestants eating slugs on Fear Factor. Others wish us luck, even thank us, communicating an attitude there's probably a German word for, meaning admiration for an enterprise you're glad someone else is doing so that you don't have to. Soon, their doubts surface. They reveal their own consumer ids, their fantasies and frustrations, as well as their superegos, their ethics and guilt. The clue to this last is the word that keeps recurring, allowed. Great idea, says my agent Joy on the phone. She calls back an hour later. So, okay, let's talk about this. Are you allowed to get haircuts? What about hair gel, inquires my hair cutter. To her, it goes without saying that haircuts are a necessity, and I agree. But she is stymied by the question of whether the hairs at the crown of the head must necessarily stick up just so. The pledge to buy only groceries resolves little. Allison, a cartoonist, wants to know if we are allowed to buy mesclun salad or only unprocessed lettuce heads. We nix the mesclun. I serve kale with garlic and olives to Charlie and Kathy. So, Judith, olives, Charlie says, fixing me with narrow prosecutorial eyes. Would you call olives a necessity? To those who inquire, Paul and I can offer no excuse for the designation of $7 a pound organic French roast coffee beans as a necessity. We cannot agree on wine. I'm Italian, Paul argues. Wine is like milk to me. I raise an eyebrow. Janice, a sociologist, mulls over the scariest proscription of all, movies. Contemplating a whole year without this nourishing pleasure, she mourns with me for a few minutes. Then she brightens, having discovered a possible loophole. But you can see documentaries, can't you? Vanillin, a video artist, emails me from Chicago. Maud wants to know if you're allowed to buy paper towels or whether you have to use a sponge. She and her co-faculty member are obsessed with our project. Her question is a slight variation on the discussion Paul and I have been having about Kleenex versus toilet paper. Paul, who is turning out to be more of a materialist than I had expected, says nose blowing requires a ready box on the desk or beside the bed. Walk into the bathroom, say I. When I consult Allison, she suggests cloth handkerchiefs. Can snot aversion be considered sufficient reason to use paper? I would tend to rule in the affirmative. But for the sake of argument, suppose we do buy facial tissue. Must they be the high-quality anti-scratch variety, or can we make do during ordinary non-cold periods with the stiff, cheap stuff? And while we are discussing paper goods, do we have to purchase the premium Scott toilet paper? Or could we settle for the store brand, which, while cheap, is scratchy? Why not use newspaper, quips Paul? Or leaves? America's embarrassment of consumer products and experiences is producing an embarrassing surfeit of trivial decisions. My lack of a hedge trimmer or a microwave oven may qualify me as an enemy combatant in George W. Bush's book. I referred earlier to Bush telling us to go shopping after 9/11. But as I start to read about income, spending, and debt, I learn that I am Jane Q. Consumer, the typical American. I earn about the median income for a New Yorker, a bit under $45,000 before taxes and business expenses. My perennially unpaid credit card balance, about $7,500, is average too. Even my attitudes about spending are normal. Research shows that just about everyone thinks she needs the things she buys and considers almost everything she wants a necessity. A life of reasonable comfort appears always just a little out of reach. Surveyed in any given year, people peg the resources necessary for such an existence at $1,000 to $2,000 above the median income for that year. Half of Americans, and not just poor ones, say they cannot afford all their needs. We're not greedy, we say. It's everyone else who is acquiring useless stuff. In one study conducted by the economist Juliet Schor, 78% of respondents stated that most Americans are very materialistic. Only 8% consider themselves very materialistic. How many in this room are very materialistic? It's about 8%. Typical of this attitude is a couple of Texans profiled in a book called Trading Up. The husband, a real estate developer named Charles owns a BMW 325 and a Jaguar X-Type. His wife, Judith, bought a Thermador 6-burner range. I think the cost is about $20,000. And other premium appliances when they renovated their kitchen. Nevertheless, Charles and Judith say they don't like to overspend and they don't believe in status buying. For instance, Charles scoffs at the idea of buying a fancy watch. I don't consider myself materialistic either. Like Charles and Judith, I don't like to overspend and I don't believe in status buying. I'm a vegetarian. I eat at the low end of the food chain. I sneer at the New York Times travel section about retreats where people sleep on cots, rise at 5, eat gruel, an apple, and 3 almonds, and pay $4,000 a week for the privilege. I buy generic tampons and $3 shampoo. And yet, I think nothing of forking over $10 to view any obscure French film that passes through New York, or $15 for an hour and a quarter of yoga instruction, half of which time I do little more than breathe. I buy the no-name tampons, but yet I unswervingly maintain that the 200 milligrams of pure ibuprofen in an Advil capsule cures my headache faster than the 200 milligram capsule of pure ibuprofen in the bottle labeled ibuprofen, which costs half as much. In the pantry, Paul and I have 3 kinds of salt. January 20th. What I want is what I've got. Unfortunately, what Paul's got, I don't want. Reader, it is time for a confession. Paul and I have 2 homes, my small but ample apartment in Brooklyn, and his house, cellar, shed, and 40 acres in northeastern Vermont. In addition, I have a cabin a few hundred yards from our house. Together, we have literally acres of space. And yet, we did not have enough of it. What Paul's got was spreading across our bedroom, down the stairs to the kitchen, a glacier of stuff, carving out its own indoor geology. Buttes of newspaper, sedimentary layers of credit card receipts, archipelagos of boxes, flyers, spreadsheets, and every while you were out memo that has entered his life in the last 2 decades. See you Thursday. The landscape was so mature that it had spawned an ecosystem. Spider webs knit together leaves of disintegrating paper. Flies swarmed on windowsills, inaccessible to swatters. The spiders ate the flies. The paper turned to dust. The fly carcasses collected on the sills and fossilized. We fought. Paul called his stuff need. I called his inability to part with it desire. Neurotic desire. We had been fighting about it since we started living together 14 years earlier. At first it seemed a room with a door would solve the problem. All I wanted to do was open the door, toss the stuff into the room, and close the door. If the door became impossible to close, Paul could rent a backhoe and shovel the stuff out. It would no longer be my problem, our relationship's problem. But as we measured and sketched, there was no place for a room in our house's long, narrow layout. The impossibility of a small change morphed into the possibility of a big one. Possibility transformed into desirability, and as these things go, to necessity, which became inevitability. I needed a winter office. My cabin is too cold in the winter. Our guests needed a private place to sleep, not the living room couch. Our boots were piled behind the kitchen door. Our skis were waxed balanced between a sawhorse and a plastic garbage can on the sub-freezing back porch. We needed a mudroom. And since Freud himself could not make of Paul's neurotic hoarding a case of ordinary untidiness, besides an office for him, we desperately needed, more closets. 6 months before we began downsizing, we began to scale up. Our cute 1,300 square foot house with curling clapboards, bedroom and bathroom, a torn screen porch, and a gravel-floored cellar prone to flooding will become 1,800 newly sided feet of floor space, incorporating a large living room and library, master bedroom, guest room, 2 offices, 2 baths, insulated mudroom, wine cellar, and many, many built-in closets. The renovation will add $25,000 to the mortgage and $1,000 to the property tax bill. An additional $5,000 will come out of pocket for furniture, lighting, and accessories. The new rooms after that will need to be perpetually heated, dusted, vacuumed, painted, and repaired. All we wanted was productivity and work, and tranquility and love, an end to the fight. Perhaps we should have sought counseling. Perhaps if we had known about him, we could have engaged Ron Alford of Disaster Masters, Inc., provider of crisis intervention for people suffering from what he calls disposophobia. If we had had a name for the disorder, maybe we could have found a less radical therapy. Instead, we came up with a home remedy, which, alas, was a homeopathic one. For the problem of having too much, we self-medicated with the American cure-all, more. January 30th. Visiting a young country full of ancient emptiness, Alexis de Tocqueville observed that its inhabitants had humble tastes. They rejected the sumptuous depravity and splendid corruption of the aristocrats on the other side of the Atlantic. Still, they had a penchant for physical gratifications, among which he named a bigger house with a few more rooms. Could Tocqueville have predicted the average new American home would grow 150 to 200 square feet every few years, from 1,660 in 1973 to 2,400 in 2004, and now houses are quite often 30, 40, or 50,000 square feet? Did I, a woman of bird-like domestic consumer appetites, imagine I would be feeding the collective obesity of the American home with a 2-person living and storage space weighing in at over 4,000 square feet, also that one of those persons could have a room of his own? I want space, people say, when intimacy strains. Did my beloved and I believe that given enough 2x4s, we could build a wall between ourselves and the stresses and disappointments of the partnered life? From design sketch to window trim, the renovation is likely to take 5 years of our labor. We're now going into year 6. We have been fighting about it since before the foundation was dug. You know, you could have rented a self-storage unit, I suggest to Paul one evening. There's one over on Route 14, you know, next to the Knights of Columbus. Self-storage, Paul snorts. Store this. As we move into a year of defining our needs and monitoring our desires, the house in progress gives cautionary new meaning to the term self-storage. For our houses are such unwieldy property that we are often imprisoned rather than housed in them, wrote Thoreau. And the bad neighborhood to be avoided is our own scurvy selves. Thank you. So you're welcome to speak your minds, ask any questions you'd like. Yes, a microphone is arriving. Or you can just yell. Is there anyone who'd like to say something? Yes, sir.
So at the end of your year, what reactions did you have to your whole process?
Hang on, we'll get that question. Okay. You can say it again. This guy with a beard.
Thank you. At the end of the year, what reactions did you have from your experience of this?
What conclusions did we draw? A number of conclusions. The main one being that this is not just a personal problem. It's really a national, societal, cultural, and global problem, which probably is not going to be solved by each of us individually. You know, there's a lot of the simple living people will tell you that if you clear out the clutter in your closet and throw out the old tennis rackets, you will find your authentic self under the debris. And I worried in the beginning, maybe my authentic self is a shopper. But what I recognized was, yes, as a matter of fact, I am more of a shopper than I thought I was. I'm not the sort of person who goes on Saturday to the mall for fun. But also that, we really can't live outside of the marketplace. There is no social life, cultural life, or even your identity is often expressed by the things that you wear, the things that you read, the places that you go, the experiences that you have. So there's the dilemma. Overconsumption is choking our earth, and yet we can't really have a culture or a civilization without goods, the exchange of goods. So I guess my conclusion was, it ain't so simple. Anyone else? Yes, here comes a... Do you remember, was it Merv Griffin who used to trot around with the...
Can you give us some examples of things that you did not purchase that you would have if you hadn't been in this program?
Everything. We didn't buy any books, any CDs, any clothing. We didn't go to restaurants. We didn't go to the theater. We didn't go to the movies. We didn't do any leisure travel. We didn't buy any gifts. We didn't, pick up a pair of earrings at a street fair. We didn't even buy a box of cookies. We didn't buy ice cream, and that was a sacrifice.
Are you still friends?
Yes, we're actually, it turned out to be a very sweet year, as a matter of fact. In the beginning there was some tension about it. The wine problem did not go away. But number one, it's fun to do a project with your partner. But we had a lot of kind of elastic time. Even leisure is a form of work. And, you have to get there on time. You have to pick up your friends. You have to get dressed, So what would we do in the end of the day? We'd get up from our desks and we'd just go take a walk. And then several hours later, we'd come home and we'd make supper. And so we had a lot of time just really to hang out together. And that was very nice. Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
Going back to your comment that something along the line that individuals can't have much impact, the sustainability folks talk a good deal about thinking globally but acting locally. Can you respond to that?
Yes. I think that's a good strategy as much as you can do it. For instance, the recent spinach problem wakes us up to the fact that it would probably be better to buy spinach if you could from a local farmer. That said, many people don't live near a local farmer. You're lucky in this area that you do, and I'm lucky in Vermont that I do, but just like in Wisconsin and Vermont, we have a very short growing season. And so I think what that's about is, trying to change your own community and not just your own self. But I do think that there's a way in which that avoids a very much more complicated question, which is that environmental problems, labor problems are global problems. And so acting locally goes only so far. I really think we have to have, global treaties, for instance. And that's true of other issues like war, terrorism, stuff like that. So it's a more comfortable and I think a more rewarding way of activism because you get to know your neighbors and you actually can really have an effect in your town. But I think it's just not quite enough. But I think there's a difference between the local, which is a community, and the self and the family. And we're very much encouraged these days to think of citizenship as having to do with only the individual and the family, and that's all you have to do. And if you just raise your kids well, then you're being a good citizen. And I don't think that is enough. Yeah.
So after the year, how have your buying habits now continued? Have they gone back to their pre-2004 levels, or are there certain items that you went without that you have continued to?
Well, we don't buy Kleenex anymore. I was just noticing the other day. And neither of us, we don't impulse buy. We really just do not. And that's good for not eating junk. It's good for not stopping when you're on the road and picking up some. And it really does cut down on those things that you sort of regret later. We bought a couch and we bought a rug, for this new living room we have. And these are these huge purchases that I hope we'll never have to buy again. That really was a big change. And also, I paid my credit card debt off, and I never ran it up again. I got an applause on Oprah for that, too. And you can do it, too.
Are you ready?
Put your hands up.
Would you do it again? And also,
Oh, hi.
hello. Would you do it again? And did you find that your friends kind of adapted to your thinking?
My friends, because I'm a writer, I am often forced to do it again. There are thin years and thick years, and you just have to sort of even them out. But our friends paid a small penalty for hanging out with us during that year. One day I was taking a walk with a friend, and taking a walk, which is what we'd always do. And in the end of the day, she said, "Let's go to the movies. I'll pay for you." I said, no, I'm trying not to do anything like that. And so I said, okay, so what's the story of this? Are you bored? And she said, no, I'm not bored when I'm with you, Judith. And then I said, do you feel sorry for me? No, I don't feel sorry for you. So what is it? So she thought for a minute, and she said, I just want to go to the movies. So, if you were going to hang out with Judith and Paul, you're either going to go to dinner or take a walk or go to some dreary free event. So there are just as many dreary events, though, that you pay for, and the free ones are a better value. Yes.
Hi, here
Hi.
in Wisconsin, we have the Midwest Renewable Energy Fair every June.
Mm-hmm.
It's the largest such event in the world. And I was interested if you also changed your energy consumption habits, for example, fluorescent light bulbs and...
Well, I live with an energy efficiency consultant. So I can't read by the lights that he's screwing into our... I'm constantly running back and getting the incandescent bulbs and putting them... we are very energy efficient. But, when I was saying about, the local and the individual and the global, there are policies that make it possible or not possible for you to do the right thing. In New York City, we take public transportation or ride our bikes or walk everywhere we go. In Vermont, there is no public transportation. We live on the top of a hill 2.5 miles from town, and it's not infrequently 30 below zero. So we cannot conserve fuel. I have a small car, but we also have a pickup truck, which we don't just drive anywhere. But and so you are, and so that's what I meant by you really have to be active in changing policy. There are now these I think very stupid little appeasing programs that the utilities have. You can write down that you want to get your electricity from green sources. It is a drop in the ocean. The only way that it really will change is if people put pressure on the Public Service Commission to force the utilities to use renewables. So
I just wondered what your comments were on either state or federal level subsidies or tax rebates for solar energy, wind energy, et cetera.
I think those are good. I don't know. What I know about this policy stuff is from living with Paul, but his feeling is actually that we are probably doing about 10% of the efficiency that we could do, and that means living at exactly the same standard of living as we live now. Things like, insulating your pipes and using, efficient bulbs, turning off the lights. It's an immense amount of efficiency that could be done, and when you add into that industrial, it's immense. So tax abatements are one, but private and public, but a certain amount of compulsory efficiency and changes have to be done. And, we are going to run out of oil. It's just a matter of when. There's no question about it that we are going to run out of oil, and then we are really going to be in very bad shape in terms of peace and war in this world. So, the question of, people often ask me, don't you think the economy will collapse if people don't buy as much? Well, we have a growth economy, and we are growing in a finite space. And what happens when you grow in a finite space? You grow out of your space. So we really don't have a choice. So, how to go about it, that's, for economists to think about. I don't.
Is it possible that this materialism, this excessive materialism speaks to a spiritual crisis in a secular society?
It's very bizarre when I hear the sound. It just comes from nowhere. I just located
This is
you.
God speaking, right now. Just curious.
I have to say, it's not my way of thinking about it. I know a lot of people do feel that way. I would put it a different way. Americans, though we have a great deal, we can buy a lot of things, tend to have actually lower life satisfaction than people who live in places, even places that are like us, Western Europe, that have less growth and less disposable income and lower consumption. Among the reasons for that is that they have security, they have health care, they have retirement security, their kids can go to school without going into debt. And they have more time. They don't work as much. And the reason that they don't work as much is because they have unions, and they have laws that make everybody take time off and don't allow people to companies to make them work overtime all the time. So they're happier even though they have less money than we do. So what do they get in exchange for that? Not just security. They get to be with their friends. They get to be active in their communities. They get to have a garden, to ride a bike, to hang around, to lie by a lake, to have a thought. And whatever they do with that, it may be spiritual meditation pursuits, fullness in their lives. It may be political activism. It may be fun. It may be creativity. I know that as a writer who has always been able to control the days of my life and the hours of my day, I don't have very much money, but I have a satisfying life. And so I don't really feel like I have to buy a lot of stuff. So I guess I would think of it as, spiritual might be one of the words that you would use for a lack of a lot of other stuff that we don't have. Americans are often accused of being greedy, of wanting too much. And I actually feel like we don't want enough. We don't want enough of the big stuff. Ecstasy, transcendence, community. We've sort of been brainwashed to think that there's too much scarcity out there. There's not enough to go around. And I think we should be wanting more.
Did you estimate how much money you saved the first year?
I paid off that credit card debt. It was more like $8,000, and I came out of the year a little bit ahead. My years don't really go from January to January in terms of when I'm paid and stuff, but I really did save a lot of money. I think I probably saved as much as $10,000, which is like almost a quarter of my income. Now we did at the end of the year buy some stuff that we hadn't bought. Q-tips, for example. So there's a slight false economy in it, but surely the paying down of the debt was real. And we didn't buy the cheapest thing. That was not our intention.
Besides not buying things, were you able to spend time evaluating things that you had and getting rid of things that you realized you didn't need? And was Paul able to do that with his stacks of paper?
No. There's a lot of we went to voluntary simplicity meetings, and there was a huge amount of discussion of decluttering, a huge amount of discussion about what we should throw away. Now, my feeling is this is a matter of taste. I know some people who love living with a lot of stuff around them. I unfortunately live with someone who likes a lot of stuff around him, and I don't like a lot of stuff around me. So that's a conflict. But if I were a person who liked a lot of stuff, or he were a person who didn't like a lot of stuff, we would be happier about this issue. We have a lot of stuff that we reuse. I mean, in his defense, he saves everything because he does use it. You know, he needs to fix the truck or, you know, build a tool or something. He reuses what he had before, and that's great. You know, I admire him for that, and I'm always amazed at this inventiveness of his reuses. So, but the papers are, what can I say? It's a pathology. It's incurable. I really love him, though.
Hi there.
Hi.
I was just wondering, it sounds a lot like a lot of the issues that you're dealing with are personal growth and personal reflection issues. So I guess I just wanted to find out, you know, what exactly, you know, your message of going around and talking to everybody, you know, what the main issues that you want people to know about.
I actually don't see it so much as I mean, the interesting thing is, of course, you experience your desires and your needs in your own life. And then the problems that we have are way beyond our own private lives. So, as I said to this gentleman here, you know, where do we make, you know, where do we solve the problem? The big transformation for me in this year, or I guess the big message, let's say, is that we are not only consumers, as much as we are encouraged in this country to think of ourselves as consumers. We are mental health consumers. We're not people in therapy. We are, you go to the hospital, you're a healthcare consumer, you're not a patient. You know, you go to students. A friend of mine told me in her university they refer to the students as TPUs, tuition paying units. Even that, you know, and we even think of our government as a consumer product. We don't like it, we're not going to pay taxes for it. We are not just consumers, we are citizens. And that means that we act toward changing policies, toward changing the culture, and toward changing these big things together. And that's, so to me, it's more of an outward journey than an inward journey. But I do think the inward journey that happens is you begin to have a much more present consciousness about your role in this great big thing. And when you buy a thing, economists talk about the point of purchase. That's where you hand the credit card over and the thing gets put in the bag and you go away with it. But the thing or the experience that you're buying has a long history. It was made somewhere using some resources by some person who was paid some wage and has some pollution in her little town where she works. It took a certain amount of fuel for it to get there to here. And when I'm done with it, it will go somewhere like a landfill, and it will last there until the end of time. And so it's not just this thing that I'm buying or this need that I have or this desire that I have. It's this whole long life of this product. And so my consciousness of that, I think, is mobilizing to do something bigger about it. I don't think that guilt, feeling like I'm a bad person, that I'm immoral, that there's some sort of, you know, addiction that I have, is a particularly good way or even a particularly effective way of getting people to change their lives or change their behavior. You know, I like pleasure, and there's a lot of great things about consumption. And to tell people that shopping makes you unhappy, I think, is a lie. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it. It does. I really like my stuff. And I think in this room, everyone likes their stuff too. And you're not bad for that. Yes?
I was just wondering where you got your idea to take, you know, not shop for a year. Did you Where'd you get the idea from?
Well, I'm interested in the ways that these great big forces that are very hard to get your mind around affect us in our intimate lives. So I've written about sexuality, I've written about our feelings about the body and death. These are big abstractions, and so to me it's an interesting place to start. And shopping is really something that it's emotional. It's not rational usually. So I thought it was a good way of communicating, a way that people could relate to themselves, and also I thought it was a good way of trying to explore these big questions. So the book is not just personal. There's a lot of, politics, sociology, anthropology, history.
Have you heard from other people that you've set an example for them and they're going to attempt to do the same thing?
I get these emails all the time. You really inspired me. And it's a funny feeling. I get a lot of emails. I get these emails, too, from people just telling me what they do and how they live. And that's fun. I didn't have a website before, and people didn't write to me. And then I get, people writing me and calling me. You cannot imagine the amount of grief I've gotten for my $55 haircut. You yuppie, bourgeois, frivolous, screaming at me on the internet, So, either people tell me I didn't buy enough and I'm going to bring down capitalism, or I bought too much and I'm a, yuppie scum. So you can't win.
But the real question is, how many vinegars do you have in your house?
You want to know which ones I have? I didn't even read them. Raspberry, balsamic.
I have a question about gifts. I know you said that you didn't buy any gifts for a year, but I'm just wondering, were you able to make gifts, or how did people, like in your family, the people who would ordinarily expect gifts at certain times, like birthdays and special days, how did they react to that? Or did they know just because it was a year,
Well, we
1
did
year?
give gifts. My niece graduated from college after many years. And so it was a big accomplishment, and we wanted to give her a big gift. So we thought a lot about it, and first we thought we'd make her something, and we finally decided we would give her something that I already had. So I have a beautiful silver and turquoise necklace that my mother bought before World War II, and then she gave to me, and I wore it for a long time, and then it was in my drawer, and it was kind of tarnished, and so we polished it up and fixed the clasp, and I sewed a little sack for it, and Paul made a little box, and we gave it to Sarah, and it looked really beautiful on her, and she said, "Oh, now I always have something of Grandma and Judy with me." And it was so much more meaningful a gift, and so much more about who she is, which is a person who really values her family, than a laptop or tickets to something that we probably would have bought if we weren't doing this exercise.
Okay. At the beginning, you were saying how you bought like your DVD player and your elephant and all these other things.
We didn't buy the DVD player.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. And did you renew your prescription for your magazine too, or?
Pardon me?
Did you renew your magazine too, or?
No, we didn't.
Oh,
We
okay.
ran out, and I read some stuff online, but I felt kind of, out of it.
I'm wondering why you chose to give up movies, and did you give up other things like concerts and plays as well? I don't usually think of that when I go to a movie or a concert. I don't usually think of myself as consuming, but more as interacting or relating or.
Well, you're doing
nurturing the
both.
arts.
You're doing both.
So why did
but
you choose
but
that?
the things that we buy are not just things. The movie industry is one of the major industries in America. Single movies cost more than the GNPs of entire third world countries. So that I was really seeing, could I cut myself off from the marketplace? And the marketplace increasingly is one of services and experiences, and not just of things. So that's what we were trying to do, is to sort of divorce ourselves entirely from all of it. But you're doing both. Yes, you're having an experience, you're sharing, you're communicating, you're learning. And as I said before, those are often enabled by purchase.
I'm just wondering, there's particular people out there that sometimes maybe ignore that there's a problem, don't care that there's a problem, or some people are just completely unaware. What sort of insight do you have to open their eyes or their minds to a change?
Well, I hope it doesn't take, 20 more degrees of global warming when we're all, we all have cancer on the top of our heads. I think some policy changes have to be made even if people don't like them, even if they don't know why they should happen. And then they get used to them, or even because sometimes people resist them. A lot of things, Vermont has very stringent environmental laws. And one of the things they have is no billboards. When they passed the no billboard law in 1973 or 4, there was a huge outcry. It was going to destroy the business environment. Well, it turns out to be really good for the business environment because people like to come to Vermont where it's beautiful and there are no billboards. So, sometimes actions have to be taken, but I actually think that in America there is far more support for much more stringent environmental law than what we are getting from this administration. When you ask people, are you worried about global warming? People say, the large majority of people say yes, and we think we have to do something about it. It is only the Bush administration in the entire world that does not think this is a problem. So, locally, you have disputes. Vermont is somebody wants to put a wind farm on a ridge line in northeastern Vermont, and the locals don't want it. Very good reason, it's a beautiful ridge line. And so you will have local disputes about how to do things. And that takes, a much bigger plan, like where are we going to put them, who's going to sacrifice, who's not going to. But, sometimes you just have to move forward. And then sometimes people's consciousness follows after. They resist, the thing happens. Sometimes they resist, the law changes, and it doesn't really change their life for the worse. It usually doesn't change their life at all, and then they get used to it. So that's, but one thing that I suggested is that University of Wisconsin Marathon County get the New York Times every single day in the school library, and that everybody read it. So reading more than your local paper is a good idea. It's 8 o'clock. Why don't we take one more question? Oh, this guy has been asking to, so we'll take 2 because he's my friend.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, there's one guy and then.
With so many jobs in our society being service jobs, I worry that if people do start cutting back on their spending, which I agree is a problem, wouldn't there be tremendous job loss? And how do we deal with this? And where do we turn these people that are losing the jobs that work at the,
Well, there's
stores?
nothing intrinsically low paying about a service job. Industrial jobs were terribly low paying before there were unions. Putting a nut into a bolt, or bolt into a nut rather, is, intrinsically, there's nothing necessarily high paying, high skilled about that. There are many, many things that need to be done that fall into the category of services. Taking care of children and old people, extremely important jobs that are underpaid, and there's no one to do them. And one of the reasons there's no one to do them is they're so badly paid. You cannot live as a caregiver for an old person. There's a guy named Herman Daly. He's the economist who coined the term sustainable economy. And he talks about development economies versus growth economies. He's the person who uses the metaphor of, outgrowing the finite space. And he says we could have an economy which was a development, not a growth economy. So instead of making more and more things, we would make fewer things, but the things might be a little more expensive, and they would not obsolesce as quickly, and they wouldn't need as much fuel to be made or to use, and they would last longer, and you might not buy as many of them. So it would be like buying a Volvo, which costs a lot and lasts for 20 years, rather than buying, 5 Fords that cost less and last for 4 years. And then there can be controls on the certain things. Like in Europe, there are controls on food prices. You buy a baguette in France, it costs the same amount any place in the country. A cup of coffee costs the same everywhere in Portugal. There are certain foods that are just considered necessities for people, including coffee. We can have different kinds of economies, and most other countries, aside from from the United States, have accepted lower rates of growth and more public investment. And they see that as a rational economic decision to make for more social stability, more public health, less cost in, if you add it up, there are other people who look at, not just the GNP in terms of the goods and services that are exchanged, but all of these hidden costs that we don't count, environmental costs, costs of crime, costs of bad health, all of those kind of things. If you subtract those, we have a much lower GNP than we would seem to have. So I'm not really that worried about the service economy, because I think that we've just been, we just have this assumption that somehow it means low-paid jobs. Get the last word.
That's just, after listening to his question, really, I thought he was going to take my wind away, because it really touches upon the question that I had to ask, and that is, in your year of enforced not purchasing, did your thoughts turn to the poor of this country who cannot buy a thing? And therefore, did your thoughts turn to, economic justice and so forth?
Yes, my thoughts were very much with economic justice. I mean, I think it's a paradox in our country that we can, as I said before, you can buy a $29 DVD, but you can't get affordable health care. So we get all kinds of stuff that we desire, and we don't have a lot of what we need. I have 2 elderly parents. My father had Alzheimer's. We could not afford to take care of him. Thank God he died. And I think that is criminal. And I think it is criminal that the rich in this country pay no taxes. We pay the lowest taxes in the developed world, and people are crying about taxes all the time. And, I wasn't trying to do the project like Barbara Ehrenreich did, where she tried to live on a minimum wage job. I was really thinking about, what role does the marketplace play in our lives? And, interestingly, it plays a similar role in the lives of people of every class. There's not, even though rich people buy a lot more expensive things, poor people also buy a lot of things in the United States, and they go bankrupt because they can't pay for necessities. They lose a job or they have a catastrophic illness. So, overconsumption and the high standard of living that the wealthy of the world have at a relatively low cost is bought at the price of the immiseration of most of the world. The $29 DVD means that somebody makes shitty wages and lives in terrible pollution. And if the DVD cost, the real cost, of not only its social cost, but its environmental cost, it would be more. And maybe we wouldn't each have 3. We'd have to live with 1. Or go to the movies once in a while. So yes, I did think about it quite a lot. And the other thing was, since I had a lot of money left over, I gave a lot away that year. But that doesn't solve the problem. Altruism is not the only way to do it. But thank you for bringing that up. So, which brings me all to, you can buy not buying it at the low, low price. I'm selling it for $20, even though it's $25 in the store, because it's an author's discount. And you can get it in the other room, and I would love to talk to you more then and sign it to anyone you want. You can send it to George Bush. I mean, and it's been a great pleasure to be here in Wausau. When all these people walked in, I said to whoever I was sitting next to, there must not be anything good on HBO tonight. But it's really been fun to be at the college, and you have a great community, and it's beautiful to be here in foliage season. So thanks for having me.